continuing our series on ways to pray, different ways that we can pray. Today, I'd like to look at probably something we all do, but it was probably made famous maybe by a monk named Ignatius of Loyola. I've actually been to Loyola, and I've been to the great, big, enormous chapel built there in his honor. It wasn't there when he lived there, and it is amazing. It is so big. Funnily enough, the day that we went there to visit it, it's a small town, Loyola, but the day that we went to visit it, we got there too late and it was closed. And so instead, my family and I, we played a game of hide and seek, believe it or not, in the front courtyard amongst all of the gardens. And for us, that was our experience of Loyola. But Ignatius of Loyola was quite a well-known monk. He's the monk who really is the one who started the Jesuits, so the Catholic Jesuits. So he had a type of what he believed really is that the imagination is a really important aspect of prayer. It's an important aspect of life, actually. Everything that we do, if you think about it, we've been raised with the idea that imagination is for children and for fantasy, but actually imagination is really what we all do before we say or do anything. We imagine it coming from our mouth before we say it, or we imagine doing it before we actually do it. So the imagination really is a really important part of who we are as God's image here on earth. We are his imagination. I mean, he imagined us before he spoke us into being, and he put his image in us. And so I believe that imagination is a really significant and important part of the Christian life. And so Ignatius of Loyola, he believed that imagination was a really important way to connect and to fully understand the scriptures and God and prayer. And it's not that we're talking to an imagined God, it's just that we are imagining ourselves talking to a God. And I know that sounds a little bit like fantasy, but really it's not. It's like what I was saying. We do this all the time. This is normal life. We imagine a thing before we actually do it. And so this type of prayer or meditation is called Ignatian or Ignatian Meditation. And what it is that we choose a portion of Scripture and we have a read through it. But I would suggest that the first read through is just to acquaint yourself with the story itself so that you kind of don't get caught up in the words here and there. We're not studying the actual words to gain a full understanding of them at this point. What we're doing is we're using our imagination to cast ourselves into that space. Now, for some of you, imagination is really easy. You can just go there in a flash, and others find rational argument much more easier. And so, for you, you might find this difficult. So, I'm going to sort of lead you in the way to do it. So, what you would do is you would read a part of the scripture that you're going to meditate on and pray through. But then, what you would be doing is you'd be asking questions like, "What else can I hear?" Like, what are the sounds of the people around? So is it a bustling town? Is it out in the wilderness where you can hear the wind blowing through the trees? Is it by the seashore where you can hear the waves lapping on the edges? Are there children crying? Are there people chattering in the crowd? And so you position yourself. What can you hear? The next thing you would ask is, what can you see? And rather than just seeing the one or two characters that are mentioned in that part of Scripture, cast your eyes around to who else is around and what else is around. Are there hills? Is it flat? Is it dry? Is it leafy? Is the ocean far-reaching and you can't see to the end of it? What can you see? Next, you might even try, what can you smell? What are some of the smells you would expect to smell? People's odor, or you talk about, frankincense and myrrh. These sort of smells, these fragrant smells, but also the smell of. I mean, let's face it, they didn't have great sanitation, so we might expect to find some smells there that we find offensive. So you can see what we're doing. We're engaging all of our senses. What would it feel like? What was the weather like? Were you cold or were you warm? Is it hot? Is it humid? Is it dry? Were you rubbing shoulders with other people? Were other people rubbing shoulders with you? Were you getting knocked a little bit left and a little bit right? So we're engaging our feeling. And even if the scripture is talking about foods, like the Passover meal or something like that, you might want to even sort of try and engage your sense of taste. What would that taste like? What similar things have you eaten? And so what you're doing is you're using your imagination to take yourself into that moment. And then when you've finally kind of painted the picture as best you can, then you read through what is being said by Jesus or by whoever else is speaking at the time. And you might want to play one of the roles. You might like to imagine yourself in one of those roles. So if Jesus is talking to John, then you imagine yourself as John. How would you as John receive what Jesus was saying if Jesus was speaking directly to you? All right, so I'm going to look at one little short piece of scripture, and maybe this will help as I guide you through this. So I'm going to look at Luke 21. And verses 1 through to 4, it's a well-known moment where a poor widow puts in a couple of mites and Jesus praises her. So let's look at that. Verse 1 of chapter 21 of Luke. He looked up and saw the rich dropping their offerings into the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow dropping 2 tiny coins. Truly I tell you, Jesus said, this poor widow has put in more than all of them. For all these people have put in gifts out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, has put in all that she had to live on. And so if we're going to do an Ignatian meditation on that, first of all, we'd be asking God to enter into our imaginations and enter into this moment and guide our thoughts and our thinking. And then what we might do is so he looked up and saw the rich dropping their offerings in. So what you might imagine there is Jesus in a temple or it is in the temple, it says there, so in a temple. And then, but there are lots of other people there, and they're giving their tithes or their offerings and the amount that they would like to give, they're giving it in public so everyone can see it. So everyone is looking at each other, giving what they're giving. And so you can imagine then, what's the sounds of that? You can maybe hear the sound of coins landing in a container of some sort, a bowl, I don't know. Maybe you can hear the sounds of gasps as some rich person puts in a large amount, or maybe some sniggers as somebody only puts a small amount in, or maybe there are some children somewhere around the edges making some noise and crying and wriggling around, and mums and dads scolding them for not doing the right thing maybe. Are there sort of more temple sounds? I don't know, bells. What smells can you smell? Often in temples, in the temple, there were smells. Incense was burned, things like that. The smell of all the other people, they were there at a special moment. So doing this, they wouldn't have been in their kind of work clothes if they had clothes to choose from. And so what we're doing, we're painting a picture of what it looks like. And you can imagine these rich people coming forward and putting in their offering. And, there'd be a lot of people around almost praising or thinking these rich people were doing the right thing. And then imagine what it must have looked like for this poor widow who walked up. I mean, she was in a humble state, a poor widow. She was poor and a widow, which meant she wouldn't have even had an income to live on. And so there she was walking up, and she only had the two barest coins. What would she have sounded like as she did that? Would she have made a big noise about herself, or would there have been tears? What smells even were happening at the time? What sounds could you hear as she dropped her 2 coins in? Just the softest, gentle clink clink of 2 coins maybe. Maybe you'd like to even, at this point, imagine yourself as the poor widow putting in your 2 coins, putting in not much and feeling like you're not giving much, but yet really all you have. And listen to what Jesus says to you. Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them. So Ignatian meditation is really best done in a quiet space. It's really best done with no distractions, where you're not going to be distracted for a little while. It's difficult to find that space. But if you can find somehow a space to do that in, you could do a great Ignatian meditation in only just a few minutes. But I find when I start using this form of meditation and prayer, and I'm engaging with God throughout all this, I'm talking to God about what I can see and talking to Jesus about what I can hear the whole time I'm doing it. But I can sometimes find myself just getting lost in the moment and an hour goes by. So anyway, why don't you give Ignatian meditation a go? Pray through it, find a scripture. It's really a great way to engage in the gospel, all of the gospels. It's a really great way to engage in the Easter story, the Passion of Christ, and all the things that happened leading up to the crucifixion. But through Acts, it's a great way to engage in Acts because these are all narrative style scriptures. And so I encourage you to give it a go and let me know how you go. God bless you.